Crash Twinsanity, probably the most controversial game in the whole series, either loved for its twist on the original Crash formula, instead of throwing it out like somebody else, or hated for being an unfinished mess. This was my first Crash Bandicoot game, and it's buried in so many layers of nostalgia I can't even pretend to be unbiased. But it's been years since I've played it, so I'm finally going to complete it 100%. Let's see if the game still holds up after 20 years. The opening cutscene has all the personality you would expect from a Crash game. Smelly shoes and Cortex cross-dressing. And then, we are set free to explore Insanity Island for the first time in the series. Just like other Crash games, you are rewarded for searching every inch of the level. By taking this ramp, you find a tiny island, which holds our first gem, the main collectible in the game. Each level has 6 gems to collect, and will add a total of 32% throughout the game. The only other requirements for completing the game are to beat each level and every boss. So that means you just need to play the game and find every gem to get 100%. At the start of Insanity Island, you find 2 more gems. After shooting off these tiki heads, I can jump across and score 1. To get the pink gem, I'm forced to commit mass murder on these chickens, and I've never felt so guilty in a game before. But you do what you gotta do and move on. Having fully explored the beach, I head into the jungle, where another tiki is waiting to be blown up. I then spend far too much time trying to move this hay to collect the first gem of the next area, Jungle Bungle, which is a really stupid name. What does bungle even mean? Oh, well, that's pretty accurate considering Lady Cortex here. The next section is a hilarious tutorial, where Coco Cortex teaches you the controls if you haven't figured it out already. The gems here are sprinkled throughout the path, with some in plain sight, and others cleverly tucked away. The hardest section has you practicing your kicks to open a set of tiki heads for the clear gem. But let me ask, why does this crate exist in the middle of the water? Is a single mask really worth dying over and reliving that face again? There lies one of the biggest problems in the game. Unskippable cutscenes that repeat every time you die. Twinsanity isn't very difficult, but in a normal playthrough, why would I risk the chance of sitting through a minute of cutscenes again, just for a gem or a few lives? But then I watch something like this, and I just have to shut up.
Hey! Yeah, you! I've been doing this for 10 stinking years! Back and forward, and I'm sick of it! Well, I'm not gonna do it no more!
I've seen too many chickens suffer an explosive fate today, so there's no way I can do the same here. That leads us into the first boss fight, a rematch with Cortex in the style of Crash 1. And then my game crashes. Cool, let's run it back and try again. The fight with Cortex is pretty solid for a first fight, as the platform becomes smaller and smaller, making it harder to avoid. And then comes the Mecha Bandicoot. Not sure why we have Transformers in a Crash game, but let's go with it. You can just run in a circle for this fight, and nothing here can get to you. After hitting him a few more times, I've officially beaten the first boss. And down we go to the Caverns, my least favorite part in the game. Twinsanity throws a dozen different gameplay styles and just hopes they stick. This one definitely didn't for me. The momentum feels off, and I hate the branching paths with no way of knowing where the gem is. There's also no way to turn around and try again. You just have to hope you chose the right one every time and go on. I, of course, failed this and had to redo the whole level to find one gem. I ended up going left instead of right here, and that's all it took. Luckily, most gems are easy to collect once you know the right path, all except this one, which would bounce me in every direction until I went as slow as a snail to get it. Are we done with this level yet? Nope. Time for one more gameplay style, where you can spin and throw Cortex across gaps. This one is much better though, and leads to some pretty good puzzles later in the game. After collecting the final gems, again, we are finally introduced to
The evil twins.
the real villains of the game. These guys make no sense and are thrown in the story at random times for no reason. To be honest, the lack of a cohesive story here doesn't surprise me, given how broken the rest of the game is. I'm pretty sure no one has ever played a Crash game for its depth anyways, so this really doesn't matter. Being spit out on Insanity Island, I have a few more gems to grab for the area. And I swear, I did my very best to spare these chickens, but sometimes sacrifices must be made. Their deaths earned me one more gem at least. If the pacing of this game hasn't hit you with whiplash yet, it will with the next section. I'm completing everything, and it still only took me an hour to reach the 4th gameplay style. But who am I to complain, because this one's great. Saving Cortex from deadly traps and that hungry bear, all while trying to collect gems and stay alive yourself, is the perfect combination for this level. Alright, we're done with escorting Cortex, and now we can go back to some traditional platforming. Not quite. Now Twinsanity is going to throw a stealth section in. This one really just slows down the gameplay, but I guess it's not unpleasant, so I'm not going to complain. Regardless, this game does not know how to stop. Before saving Cortex, there's one more gem to collect, and this one shows a major flaw in the design of metal crates. For some reason, Crash has no shadow over these. I'm not sure if this was intentional design, but either way, it makes bouncing between the metal crates difficult throughout the entire game. With that done, I find Papu's village, which is the first time the game opens up and allows you to breathe for a minute since the very beginning. I find this kind of odd since one of the main points of the game is to be an open world, but in reality it feels like a string of levels within a linear path. While it is possible to backtrack in some sections, it never feels right. In some parts you can't get back to at all, without redoing the whole level. But hey, I'll take what I can get with this game. After collecting a few gems, I escort this worm across the map to free Cortex, collect the crystal, and start up a chase scene. Now we're getting somewhere. While not as terrifying as a boulder about to smash you, it's always fun to play something familiar with Crash. Time for the next boss. This music tells me it's going to be a huge battle. Unfortunately, you can just run in a circle to beat him. After taking down the totem god on my first try, I stumble into another glitch. The corpse of this totem still kills you, and there isn't a checkpoint till later in the level, so that means it's time to do it all over again. Great, can't wait. With that out of the way, I have one more gem to collect for Insanity Island, and that brings us up to 24% so far. Now, I can sail away to my favorite level in the game. The Iceberg lab starts out with an open area, free to explore every corner without a single enemy to worry about. Most of the gems here are tucked away behind a layer of nitro crates. Some are a simple puzzle, while others need precise platforming to get through. Since I can't do that, I'm just going to abuse the fact that you can keep gems even after you die. This one was definitely the hardest, and I had to fail a few times before finally getting it down. I find it much harder to precisely jump here in Twinsanity compared to every other Crash game. 2 of the gems were really well hidden, reminding me to keep an eye out for the future. Having collected all 6 for the area, it's time to start up the climb. Nothing here is too difficult, so it's a great place to relax, collect a few hidden gems, and just enjoy the ride.
The check bounced. Are you sure? Well, the past few years have kind of been slow. Wrath of Cortex didn't do as well as we'd hoped, and...
Oh, so I see Cortex is the type of boss that doesn't pay his employees and then kills them for complaining? I guess it makes sense why Crash has lasted this long. With the penguins gone for now, I toss around Cortex to progress through the level and collect a few more gems before finding Uka Uka in his icy tomb. While this boss isn't anything special, the camera definitely is. It had me playing off-screen for a good chunk of the fight. And when it's over, the game has a panic attack and now I'm out of bounds for some reason. At this point, I really should just be happy the game hasn't crashed on me again. After fighting a few more aliens, which still feels out of place for Crash Bandicoot, it's time for the most disturbing cutscene I've ever seen in a game marketed towards children. I have to wonder what the developers were smoking while making this. The gameplay that follows is a nightmare for completionists. You see that gem I just missed? There's no way of turning around to get it, and the checkpoints are activated no matter what, so I couldn't even die to try again if I wanted to. And that's not the worst of them. At the very end of the level, if you miss this gem here, you roll right into the cutscene for the next level. Yes, there is technically a path back to the Iceberg lab, but it takes forever to get back to the top for a single attempt. This means the best method is to turn off autosave and load the previous save file, which takes this long in utter silence each time.
What have I got?
And to make things worse, this cutscene is unskippable. meaning I have to watch Crash pawn over Cortex's ass on repeat. But eventually I did it, got every gem in one go, and made it to the next level. And I'm glad this is a finished game that doesn't copy and paste its levels. I would hate to do this all over again. Right? Icy's Hijinks is the level that feels most like a traditional Crash game. The path through Engine's lair is completely linear, with a few hidden gems along the way, of course. This one in particular is one of the hardest gems in the game. Those winding gears are super easy to fall off of. In order to get the gem, there's a multi-step puzzle across the room to set off nitro crates. And I think this shows the true potential of an open-world Crash game. Getting to explore and solve platforming challenges that are hard to master, but satisfying to pull off once you got it down. This is all followed by a fight against Engine himself, the biggest pushover that can just be run in circles around. But it's all worth it, because this leads into the big chef himself.
Ah, yummy! Fresh meat for my point.
This is my favorite chase scene from any Crash game, and it is pretty difficult compared to the rest of Twinsanity. Sadly, it doesn't last forever, and we have to leave the walrus behind. Now it's time to do another boss fight, 5 minutes after the last one. And guess what? You can beat Entropy and Embryo by running in a circle. Not sure if you've noticed, but there's a pretty boring pattern going on here. Oh, my bad. You do have to run in a circle while jumping for Entropy. I guess that makes it different. And that marks the halfway point of the game, with 48 gems collected. On to the Academy of Evil. Oh, and look, Coco's back. Guess she's not staying for long though. Okay, now she can kill me by standing there. Best not to question this game and just go on. This opening hub is all about nitro crates and playing soccer, and I definitely started out horrible at this. The developers must really have liked the ball mechanics in this game, because every gem here either takes mad soccer skills or can easily be gotten without doing the puzzle. I'll be honest, I didn't even bother looking for the solution on this one. I can immediately snag 5 gems in this section, but one of them is placed high in the sky and locked by a platform that only moves once you've beaten the whole academy. At first I tried climbing the tree beside it, but that doesn't solve the nitro crate sitting up there. Eventually I did find a way to get on the roof, where I can then activate this checkpoint despite the invisible wall. That lets me go kill myself and then spawn on the roof to get the gem. Sadly, this does nothing for me because the metal crates disappear upon a death, but at least I found the start of a speedrun skip. Time to actually get started with the level. Okay, so the soccer balls are just a tutorial for this gameplay style. Guess all that practice is finally gonna pay off. Or not. For most of the puzzles here, you just drop Cortex off and go press a few buttons. This level isn't especially difficult anywhere. Honestly, the hardest part for me was being patient on these slow-ass platforms to get here. All of the gems are either cleverly tucked away or just sitting on the main path. Either way, I come to the end of the level only to find out I missed one gem. And unfortunately, I missed the very first gem right here. That means I get to redo the whole level because I didn't turn around and look after the very first checkpoint. That's okay though, because Dingodile is the next boss, and he's always got the best fights in the Crash series. And you know what? For yet another boss that is beaten by running in a circle, this one does feel the coolest. Being real though, he is one of the harder fights in the game. He even managed to kill me by doing a 180 out of nowhere. Totally worth the death just to see his victory dance. After defeating Dingodile, you're kicked back out to the courtyard. And if you don't notice the newly opened door, you can accidentally run back into Cortex and be forced to redo the whole level. Luckily, I remember making this mistake last time I played, so I know better now. Classroom Chaos is a series of tight corridors with a mix between stealth sections and tight platforming. You already know how I feel about stealth in the game, but the platforming here more than makes up for it. The music also backs it up to make one of the best levels of the game. If you haven't played Twinsanity before, its soundtrack was done by the a cappella group Spiral Mouth, and it's so good you quickly forget they aren't using any instruments. But alright, back to the gameplay. The narrow halls eventually open up to a spiraling room and rising acid. I mean, I guess it's acid, but I don't know why it's oozing all over the place. This last part would be a challenge if I couldn't just skip the whole beginning on these bounce crates. The game wants you to run in a circle, but that takes forever. This entire level is completely linear, so all the gems are easy to find. After one final room, it's time for Crash to step aside, because it's Cortex's turn. That's right, we're 2/3 of the way through this game, and they decide now is the time to use their other playable characters. Cortex gameplay relies heavily on his lack of mobility. He can't double jump or melee attack, so everything is designed around his ray gun. This often leads to some interesting puzzles that would be easily jumped over if playing as Crash. Or it leads to boring fight sections where you don't have to move. If you happen to run out of ammo, Cortex is left helpless with one of the best running animations in the game. Ammo is plentiful though, so it's unlikely for this to happen if you're careful. Once again, the gems are in plain sight here, so it's no problem to grab all 6. And that was it. Outside of boss fights, this is the only level where you play as Cortex. The same rings true for the next level with Nina, Twinsanity's third and final playable character. Don't let that box lie to you, there is no 4th character here. Nina's gameplay is focused on combat, and her main gimmick is a grappling hook arm. That might have been interesting if it worked consistently. It seems there are a few gargoyles through the game where it refuses to react to your inputs. I would try holding forward or not touching the analog stick, and nothing seemed to be consistent. I died 10 times in this section, and I still don't know what I did to get past. Rooftop Rampage ends with one of the tightest chase scenes in the game, where Nina is nearly trampled by a school bus. As for the gems throughout the level, it seems like the developers really didn't want to have 6 in here, but they felt obligated to stay consistent. Almost everyone on the path is forced to be picked up just by playing normally. Now the baton is passed right back to Cortex, and I guess these aliens forgot what they were doing here. The final fight for the Academy is Madame Amberly, who is probably the most creative fight in the game, having to avoid her electricity and shoot her bells back to win. Just make sure you don't fall off before or after the fight, because there isn't a checkpoint and you're taken all the way back to the glitchy gargoyles that took me forever to get past the first time. After beating Madame Amberly again, I've finally conquered the Academy of Evil, and now it's time to head to the final hub, Twinsanity Island. I get that this is supposed to mirror Insanity Island, so I'll excuse the reused level here, but the cutscene too, do they just have a kink or something? Because this is way too much Cortex ass for one game. It also has a line with some seriously messed up implications for Nina.
My daughter, niece!
I love that Cortex looks over, as if Crash would even know what it meant for Nina to be his daughter and niece. As for the level itself, the main difference is in the gem locations, which are significantly harder than before. The most challenging ones require you to jump around these nitro crates, but this wasn't nearly as frustrating as the original because I didn't have to restart a single time. Instead of missing a gem and then hitting a checkpoint, I was just dying on repeat until I finally got it. Having collected everything in Rockslide Rumble, it was time for the single hardest level to 100%. While that's technically true, it's really just because of this one gem that took me over 20 minutes to get. I really suck at playing with balls, so I even game over twice trying to get this one. After I finally got Crash to cooperate, I managed to collect the gem, and then I can easily sacrifice him off to get the other gems on the island. Now I understand that this is the final world, so the collectibles should be hard to get, but I'm not going to try when there's such a simple alternative. Speaking of, I also found this definitely intentional way of getting the yellow gem without having to solve any of the puzzle. Up next is another escort mission with Cortex, one that's a bit more difficult and had some interesting puzzles throughout. This one, while simple once you've gotten it, was still one of my favorites. Most of the gems are pretty straightforward to collect, as long as you don't run into an invisible ceiling that stops you. Having rescued Cortex for the final time, the game gives you one last open section to explore, with some well-hidden gems along the way. In theme with the rest of the world, the other gems are once again earned with these weird orbs. After snagging all 6 of them, the game offers a last chance to explore the world with Twinsanity before the final boss. Seeing as I've nearly lost my sanity making this video, I'm definitely not replaying more levels for the heck of it. I've had to do that too many times in the past few hours. So with only 6 more gems to collect, it's time for the final level. Ant Agony has some of the best platforming out of any Crash game. It's undoubtedly the hardest level in Twinsanity, and feels much closer in difficulty to the original trilogy. I've always loved these colored platforms because they speed up the pace of the game by forcing you to stay with a cycle. On the other hand, the gyms want you to slow down and explore the full level. Instead of being locked behind platforming challenges, they are cleverly hidden. That way you can really enjoy the last few minutes of this game. Honestly, I don't have much more to say about this final level. It was 20 minutes of great platforming without stumbling upon a single glitch. And with the final gem collected, I can face the evil twins to finish the game. But not before this ridiculously long hallway. Between levels in Twinsanity, they often put long tunnels so the game can load in without the player seeing it. I think that's a great alternative to a loading screen, but normally they would include boxes and pits, something to make the tunnel interesting. This last one is just super long and boring. I guess the idea was to try and build suspense before the fight, but it definitely did not work for me. 30 seconds is too long to just walk in a straight line. So how does Twinsanity end? With a tag team fight where you play as Nina, Cortex, and Crash to take down the evil twins. This is definitely the longest fight, and it was a solid finish for a game that was all over the place. I especially appreciated running in circles for one last boss. And I would expect nothing less than to play the final minute with a new gameplay style of the Mecha Bandicoot, where you also can just run in circles. And that's the whole game. After playing it for the first time almost 20 years ago, I've finally beaten Crash Twinsanity 100%. I've gotta say, this game is both better and much worse than what I remembered. The cutscenes and humor throughout are great. Nothing beats this final scene, with Cortex trapped in Crash's head for eternity. And I totally get that this is an unfinished game. There have been plenty of videos made on the chaotic development of Twinsanity, so given the time they had to work on it, I'd say it came out as good as one could hope. There are glitches in every level that have been abused by the speedrunning community, and my game flat out crashed twice in just a 7-hour playthrough. But it honestly just added to the fun mess that was Twinsanity. I was never angry at the glitches, and more often than not, they made me laugh at the poor, broken state of this game. As for completing the game, you are rewarded with one final cutscene, and all the concept art for what could have been. If you've never played it before, I would definitely recommend Twinsanity, at least to experience the dying breath of the original Crash Bandicoot series. If you made it through this entire video about a PS2 game from 20 years ago, I appreciate you sticking around. And there's probably more videos you might like on the channel, like this pacifist challenge I did in Spyro Reignited. Thanks for watching, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.